Good afternoon and welcome to the first of the three-part series of seminars Re-engaging and Rebooting Volunteering, which is designed to help equip volunteer-involving organisations with the tools to navigate this difficult transition period as we emerge from this COVID lockdown. So thank you all and welcome and thanks for joining us today. So we'll explore re-engaging volunteers from the perspective of a volunteer manager. My name is Colleen Williams and I'm the Learning and Development Manager at the Centre for Volunteering. I'd like to begin, as we always do, just by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we found ourselves and this event takes place, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm in Fairlight, I'm right near Kaimai Point in the land of the Guy-Migal people, and I'd like to pay my respects. If you'd like to acknowledge the lands that you're on, please open the chat and pop it in. I know we've got a range of amazing individuals here with us today that are coming in from all over the state, so please let us know which lands you're in from. And thank you all for joining us here. And thank you especially to our panelists. We've got volunteers managers from across the sector to speak of their experiences over the past 18 months, some of the strategies that they've used to engage volunteers, and those that they propose using, looking at reintegrating their volunteer workforce again today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. Kylie Elliott, who is the Volunteer Coordinator Manager from the Sydney's Children's Hospital Foundation and the recipient of the 2020 Excellence in Volunteer Management Award. Hi, Kylie. We've got Oscar Musons, the Volunteer Manager at the Asylum Seeker Centre, who was the recipient of the 2019 Excellence in Volunteer Manager Award. Diana Piper, the Manager of Volunteers and Corporate Engagement at the Cerebral Palsy Allowance. Hello. And Leanne Pitt-Barile, the New South Wales Volunteer Team Leader from Share the Dignity and the 2021 Adult Hunter Volunteer of the Year Award today. We're so thrilled that you could join us here today. So what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be, we'll be asking questions to our panelists and we'll be having a bit of a discussion about re-engagement of volunteers in general. We will be taking questions throughout the session. So please post your questions into the chat box. And we'll be monitoring from our team from the Centre for Volunteering as we go along. We'll stop between the questions just to have some time to answer as we go through the session, and we'll address them at the end of each section. Right, so to kick off, I want to just begin by asking our panelists a little bit about their volunteering programs, just so we get an idea of who's here, who's with us today. So just an outline of their volunteer involving organisations, their kind of mission, what their aim is, and a little bit about their client base. So Kylie, you're at the top of my screen, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Hi, so I work for the Sydney Children's Hospitals Foundation. We support the entities that you can see behind me. So we're the fundraising arm of the Sydney Children's Hospital at Randwick, the Children's Hospital at Westmead, Kids Research, Nets and Bear Cottage. So our foundation does all the fundraising for the hospitals. So a common misconception is that the volunteers that come from the foundation are the ones that sit by the beds with the kids. Our volunteers are the fundraising volunteers. So we go out to events, external events, but sometimes we do have events inside the hospital, and we also have volunteers that support the foundation staff in our offices as well. So our mission is to raise money for sick kids in Sydney and the greater New South Wales.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kylie. Oscar.
So I'm the volunteer manager at the Asylum Seeker Centre. We provide practical and personal support to people seeking asylum in the community. We support a total of 4,000 people seeking asylum in Sydney with different services like accommodation, financial relief, food, education and employment. We've got volunteers who are supporting us with all those services. And at the moment, we've got around 300 volunteers who are supporting the Asylum Seeker Centre.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Oscar. That sounds like a big job. Thank you so much for joining us today. Diana.
Yeah, hello. I'm Diana from the Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and I'm actually sitting in Thornley at the moment on Darug and Gringai land. And just a little bit about the Cerebral Palsy Alliance. I guess we're a very old organisation. We've been going for 75 years, just over 75, and we provide family-centred therapies for clients with cerebral palsy and who are living with other neurological and physical disabilities as well. We try to provide whole of life support for our families. So right through the journey of life cycle, from babies to children to teenagers and adults. And we do that by providing day programs and life skills equipment, all sorts of different ways that we can support our families and in particular children, I guess, with early intervention and that sort of thing. Our therapy teams work with individuals and families mainly just to sort of help our clients reach their potential in their lives. We've got about 132 different sites. We're a really large organisation. We see about 5,500 clients, and we've got a staff of well over 2,000 these days. We reach through metropolitan Sydney and the regional areas of New South Wales and ACT. And we have around 350 active individual volunteers who engage in a variety of different ways, both client-facing and also supporting our corporate services as well. And we have corporate partners who engage in corporate volunteering too, but they obviously haven't been possible over the last couple of years. So that sort of gives a rough outline of what we do at Cerebral Palsy Alliance.
Yeah, fantastic. That's incredible and great to see all those different areas as well. Superb. Thank you, Leanne. Oh, just on mute still.
There we go. So I volunteer with women's charity, Share the Dignity. It was, we're only a young charity, so we were founded in 2015, and initially it all started with one collection of 450 packets of sanitary items back in March, April 2015, and it just snowballed from that. So we have something like 5,000 volunteers across the country, and here in New South Wales I lead the New South Wales state team, and we have anywhere between 800 to 1,000 volunteers. I'm sure, like many of you, you can have a volunteer base, but whether or not you have actively engaged volunteers, that's one of the biggest issues that we have. We run two campaigns, two dignity drives a year, March and August, where we collect sanitary or period products. In November, we run our It's in the Bag campaign, where we collect filled handbags with what we call the 7 essential items. And we then distribute from our campaigns to our charity partners. So we have around 3,000 charity partners nationally. In New South Wales, we work with about 600 organisations that we support by either delivering sanitary or period products to them, and at Christmas we deliver these filled handbags so that women who are experiencing homelessness or domestic violence, maybe they're in a safe house, a women's refuge, they receive a gift at Christmas time. So yeah, that's a ballpark of what we do. Our mission is to end period poverty. We do work towards restoring dignity to the women and girls who really should have access to period products when they need them. So hashtag end period poverty is basically what we work with. And yeah, our client base would be those charity partners who work with women and girls in need. In the last 5 years, obviously the landscape's changed a bit, particularly in relation to the language that is used. We do say women and girls in need, but of course that covers those who may or may not identify as women, and basically, if you bleed, you receive. So that's the simplest way to put it. And you know, for us, period poverty is real. It's something that's not considered, even considered in this country, but it definitely is. So I'm really passionate about that, ending period poverty and making sure that anybody who needs period products has access to them when they need them. So that's
Fantastic.
us.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Leanne. It's so wonderful to have you on board and have such an incredible range of different volunteer organizations represented here, because you all have different things, I'm sure. And Leanne, you mentioned that, you know, it's not just enough that you've got a role of volunteers. You really need to have them actively engaged. And we know that along our panel here today, you've all been doing some really interesting and amazing things to keep your volunteers engaged, and that's what we're here to talk about a little bit today. So I want to probably hand over first to Kylie. I mean, what we'd like to talk about for the next kind of sessions, and if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat, is a little bit about volunteer engagement. And I'm happy to have this as more of a discussion rather than just going one by one. So feel free to jump in for the other participants. But Kylie, if you could kick us off and just let us know, how have you engaged your volunteers over this lockdown period?
Okay.
How have you maintained that engagement?
Okay, well, that's volunteer engagement is my number one thing. It's my biggest passion. I have a team of over 1,000 volunteers. I think there's about 1,060. We're getting close to 1,100. We should hit that within the next month or two. We only started out with 200 2 years ago. So they're all active volunteers. They've all volunteered in the last 2 years. So the first thing that happened as soon as COVID hit, as soon as lockdown hit, it was 5 o'clock on a Saturday. I got on and sent an email out to all volunteers. And I got personal. I said, I'm looking at lockdown in a 3-bedroom house with 2 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Wish me luck. Just those little things, like I don't have to share, like I'm not sharing my address or things like that, but just sharing a tiny bit about myself and asking, are you okay? But being honest, not just sending something from our marketing team, from our CEO saying, are you okay? Sending something from me and just being a bit personal with the volunteers and asking if you're not okay, just to message me. And how about we try and do this together? So I set up a Spotify and said, I've just added a few uplifting songs that make me feel good. And I've asked some of our staff to add to it. How about you send me in your request, we'll add to it, and let's just all get through this together. So that was the first thing. I got a lot of emails back from volunteers telling me about, you know, their fears and what their plans were. And then I made sure every fortnight, sometimes it was weekly, I would email them, but at least fortnightly during lockdown to see that they were okay. And we started a virtual family trivia night every Thursday night. So we did that for 14 weeks. The week before was my last week. But it was good because we made it a family thing, because we found that a lot of the parents were on Zoom, a lot of the kids were on Zoom. And so Zoom wasn't a really family friendly thing. It was always just something that was a barrier in families. So we made it a family friendly thing. And I actually onboarded, I think it was 12 new volunteers that were all under the age of 10. I would have at least 6 co-hosts every week that were under the age of 10 that would write their questions. They'd have like 6 questions in their category. They would write their questions and then they would present it by reading it. I had a little girl that has an intellectual disability that grandparents would come and watch and would cry because her reading got better. And I had families messaging me saying it really meant a lot. So it really wasn't hard. Like, it was a little bit of work, can't lie, but it really wasn't that much work to just reach out, because there's some volunteers that were I was the only person that was reaching out to them. So funnily enough, in the last probably month, I've had more volunteer requests on our website than I've had in a while. So just emailing them back and introducing myself in. I just think that's the most important thing. And by doing that, I haven't had any negative emails. And I even 1 week, the funniest story, I actually was sending out a reminder to all the volunteers about the trivia for the week and what the theme was for the week. And I used to cut and paste it because of my signature from an email into our database to send the email out at once to all volunteers. I didn't realize I got this extra line in there that I shouldn't have, because I was sending an email to a volunteer saying, can you action this ASAP for this virtual job that I've got for them? But I sent it out to all volunteers. So the email read, can you action this ASAP? Don't forget, we've got our family trivia night on. Within an hour, I got about 25 emails back from volunteers going, I'm so sorry, I don't have any children, but I'm working tonight, but I'm sending my afternoon. And I'm like, what did I do? Oh my goodness, that really sounds mean. So now I better write back. So then I wrote back again and said, please, I'm so sorry, I accidentally cut and pasted. Then for 4 days, it went for 4 days, I had over 200 emails from people going, don't stress, Kylie, we all do it. So because I'm so because I just take that bit and get a bit personal with my volunteers, I can do it, like not anything, but they will forgive me for accidents where I won't get an email back saying, you did this wrong, you shouldn't have sent that. I get, don't worry about it, don't stress, that's hilarious, you know. That's what I think anyway.
So how many people did you have attending your family trivia night? I'm curious.
That week was our big week, and I think we had about, I think in our biggest week, we had close to 50 families that attended. So, yeah, and I think, I felt really bad, but hey.
some amazing ideas there. I love your idea of having a quiz and inviting the family. Such a good idea, especially given that you're fundraising for a children's hospital. And the Spotify top tip for sure, absolutely. And I love that idea of that vulnerability and that personal connection, because that's where volunteers are here. They're not in it for the money, they're in it for the meaning and the connection. Thank you so much, Kylie. So many great ideas there. How about you, Oscar? Did you have similar kind of engagement activities?
Yeah, I think we already have the processes and structure in place from the last lockdown. So we have to readapt some of the roles here at the center so that they could start working remotely. And in the beginning, we were kind of worried about their well-being and how we keep them engaged and how we keep them motivated. But they were actually more worried about the people we support. We support people that come from 97 different countries. And I was like, well, what have you been doing to keep yourself motivated, to keep engaged with the center? And I'm just worried about the people we support. How are they doing? How are they keeping up? Because, they don't have access to government support at all. Luckily, this time, the people we support had access to disaster relief payments and then some Red Cross payments. And we were doing deliveries before the lockdown, so we could no longer do deliveries. So a lot of the people were doing deliveries no longer could volunteer with us, but instead we were giving out food vouchers, right? So instead of doing the regular deliveries, people were buying food vouchers for us so that we could send them directly to the people. And the people we support actually prefer vouchers because then they can buy whatever they want. We give them some dignity as well. So we were doing regular catch-ups over Zoom. We do use Google Meet instead. And for me, in the beginning, it was a way to keep them engaged and do a bit of a quiz, but they just wanted to ask questions about the people we support. So we ended up bringing team leaders, and they were giving an update on each of the areas for them to find out how we were supporting people. And they felt kind of relieved to see how much support they were getting during the lockdown. Some days we were getting around 200 calls from the clients just because, they have no other way. We are their safety net here in Australia. So we were telling them how difficult it's been to just, go through everything online, to keep people connected. We also have a laptop program, so people can donate laptops to the center, and then we refurbish them and donate them back to the people we support. But during the lockdown, we couldn't do that because most of the people we support live in the hotspot areas. They live in where the community is. So most of them were located in Western Sydney, and we couldn't tell them to come all the way to Newtown to collect these laptops. So we started delivering the laptops directly to where they live. And we had volunteers helping us, calling them and asking them what kind of devices they needed. And we've been delivering them. So for us, it was very, and for the volunteers, it was very important to keep engaged with the people we support. And a way to do that was just by delivering devices to them. So another way we kept them connected was just having to call the people we support and directing them to the closest vaccination centers and even helping them arrange an appointment for COVID vaccines. So then we were registering all that in the system, and now it's been good because the volunteers now feel, in a way that they've been helping people get vaccinated, so that we can all, come back to a sense of normality.
Mm.
Yeah, that's incredible, and I think it's so important, that idea of sharing, finding a way to still share the impact that you're having. And you talk about dignity, and that just makes me think, Leanne, we should switch to you. That's your area of expertise. Have you found any special ways that you've engaged your volunteers over this latest lockdown period that you'd like to share?
Sorry, was that me? Yeah.
Yes.
It's the last lockdown for New South Wales, some of our Central Coast and our Greater Sydney and Southeast volunteers have been in lockdown for so long, and for many of them, they weren't actually able to, you couldn't go out of your LGA, you couldn't go more than 5 kilometres from home, and the work that we do is very physical in that we actually, during a campaign, the volunteers have to go to, during March and August, Woolworths are our corporate sponsor or supporter, and they host a collection box for us. So we had volunteers that had signed up to pickups, but then were unable to go out of their LGA or travel that more than that 5Ks. So as much as, and our volunteers were the same, how are we going to support our charity partners when we can't actually go and collect these sanitary items? We were really fortunate that Woolworths worked with us, and so they held on to the donations until our volunteers could actually safely get out there to actually pick up those donations. Some of our volunteers were like, you know what, Leanne, do I have to check that collection box while I'm doing my essential shopping? Because I don't feel comfortable actually hanging around. When I go to the supermarket, I just want to go in and grab it and get it out. And then we had volunteers that were like, oh, I can do that, check. I'm at the shops every day doing my essential shopping. So we had two sides of the coin. So we had this similar sort of concerns from our volunteers about how are we going to continue supporting our charity partners. But in relation to engagement, like Kylie, I'm really passionate about our volunteers, and one of the biggest things that I get out of what I do is, validating the work that they do and encouraging them and acknowledging everything that they do. So I was still going into, we actually here at Share the Dignity, we use a communication platform called Workplace. So it's very similar platform to Facebook. It's run by Facebook. So we were actually able to do video posts or live videos, and our state is broken up into about 19 regions. So we have little localized teams. But I would pop in from time to time, and I was in lockdown too, and I would go, tonight's my book club night that we're doing by Zoom. This is the book that we've read this month. What's your favorite book? Those sort of posts really engaged our volunteers. And for some of those volunteers, they were like, oh, every time you do this, I get another book that I'm keen to read, So we did that. I did things like, this is my favorite movie all time. What's your favorite movie? We did, I tried to do things that, have you learned a new skill while you're in lockdown? We've gone into lockdown this weekend and I've already cleaned the fridge and cleaned the blind and cleaned my ceiling fans. What have you been doing? So it was all about, giving our volunteers an outlet, I suppose, somewhere to safely engage with someone outside of their immediate home, because many of our volunteers, they're working from home, they're homes, they're schooling their kids from home, their partners are working from home. Their mental and emotional health was really our priority, and it was all about how can we keep that connection with our volunteers while they're actually in lockdown within four walls. So we just we ran some competitions. We set up a pen pal type thing, like a pen pal buddy system. So we put it out there and said, if you feel like you'd like to to connect with somebody and just communicate with them separately, pop your name below, and then the next person would go in and go, you know what, I'm really keen to do that. I'm going to be your buddy, your pen pal buddy, and they started messaging directly. So it was really important for us to keep that connection amongst our team while they couldn't physically go out and do a lot of the work that they would normally do.
Yes, so important. And just you mentioned just that importance of connecting people with someone where they can give input as well, like their favorite book or movie, but making the connection to feeling that you're part of something bigger than yourself and your house and your four walls that you're trapped inside. Thank you so much, Dan. Diana, did you have anything that you'd introduced this lockdown period for engagement?
We've done very similar to the other speakers. Lots of phone calls, of course. We've actually got, I guess, a lot of our volunteers are quite long-term volunteers. We've got a lot of volunteers are sort of 5 and 10 years, so we know them really, really well, and they're like friends. So that's been really important to keep in touch with them. And for a lot of them, what they do for us is quite a big part of their lives. So they really did feel quite sort of lost without that engagement, I think. So we sort of divvied up the list amongst us and took a certain number each and made sure that we kept in contact with people personally, and we sent out newsletters, of course, via Campaign Monitor about monthly, just with updates and interesting stories from the organisation. We've also got a Facebook group which has about 200 members, which was a bit similar to what Leanne was saying, that you were using a Facebook platform. So we were able to do sort of feel-good posts and video. We posted videos telling our volunteers, how much we miss them and how we couldn't wait to have them back and that sort of thing. So, and shared sort of volunteer stories and celebrated people's milestones if it was in lockdown, service milestones and other stories from our organisation and our research stories and that sort of thing, just to keep anything we could think of to keep people engaged. And at one point we did, every Friday, one of us would put up a Feel Good Friday post and that sort of thing, just with something silly that we thought might lift people's spirits. So all that sort of thing. And I guess the other thing is we've got sort of some volunteers who are very much a part of the family that they support. So we've got, for example, a bocce program, which hopefully a lot of you are familiar with bocce after the Paralympics, because that was sort of one of the sports that we actually had a couple of athletes who did very well in that. And the volunteers who support that program most of them have been doing so for quite, for at least 5 years. So they're very much a part of that family. So they ran a Zoom once a week, a Zoom bocce tournament, very, very cleverly set up virtual courts and played. So we had bocce players playing in one house and bocce players playing in another house on virtual courts. It's hard to explain, but the volunteers joined in on that, and they know all the clients so well, all the athletes. So they were chiming in, and then after that, they would have a trivia session with the volunteers as well. So that was a really lovely way to keep that particular group of volunteers really, really engaged with their program, and with the athletes who were actually their good friends as well. So Yeah, that sort of thing. I think it was really important. We had notes on our website, of course, too, on the volunteer vacancy page, just making sure everybody was up to date, because I just think it was really important, you know, to keep people informed apart from anything else, as well as engaged, you know, just so that people weren't left wondering what was happening in the organisation. So we've found that was really important too. And we had a lot of really lovely feedback, actually, I must say, from our volunteers, who really appreciated, you know, and I'm sure you all did too, you know, the efforts that we went to keep in touch with everybody. So, yeah, we're looking forward to getting them back, hopefully, you know, fairly soon.
Great, we're going to get to getting them back. I think that's question 4 or 5. If anyone's got any questions at this point, just about re-engagement that you'd like to ask our panel today, please do pop them into the chat. What we're going to be talking about a little bit further is a little bit about how the programs have been adapted. So thank you all for those amazing suggestions. And it seems there's a couple of key themes, you know, just about the importance. And I think that's whether you're volunteers or remote or getting re-engaged, or they've in COVID lockdown or not, that importance of connection and sharing information on your organisation and your programs and your impact as well. But we want to talk a little bit about how your programs have changed during this period. So what's changed and what's been successful about that with your respective missions? So basically, how have you adapted your programs during this period, and how successful has this been for your organisation and your respective missions? So Oscar, you talked, for example, already about how you've already adapted some of your core roles actually to work remotely, and actually included roles that never existed, for example, helping your asylum seekers with COVID vaccination planning, which is probably something that was never on a role before. But I'm curious to hear from yourself a little bit further, and from the others, how have you adapted your programs over this period?
So first of all, we had to adapt the position descriptions, and just to make sure that all the tasks that were associated to each of the roles that we had here at the center were in accordance to the times that we were living. Because most of them, what happened here at the Asylum Seeker Center, and I guess to many other organizations, is that we were used to having everyone under one roof. So all the volunteers that were engaged with us had to come through the center one way or the other. What happened during the pandemic is that we started operating from 3 different places as well. So we had to reimagine things. We have to adapt our processes in order to understand that volunteers don't only come and help here directly in the center in Newtown, but they can be working with us remotely. And that's what was happening. We started doing food packing and deliveries from the Addison Road Community Center in Markville. And we also had a room in the Auburn Center for Community that was used on twice a week. So we had to reinvent things and adapt the position descriptions. We had to have volunteers signing different kinds of agreements. So whether that's volunteering from home agreement that comes with volunteering from home guidelines, and also volunteering remotely. So that's something that we didn't have in the beginning. It was just volunteering was just coming to Newtown, right? So yeah, things had to be readapted, and also that meant that we had to train volunteers again on how things were done, and especially working remotely, because for some of them, they always relied on having someone to go and ask for questions, but now they had to be on their own from home. That in the questions that we've asked them now during the catch-up that we've had, they've actually enjoyed this time, but they're really looking forward to be back to the center and have a combination of the both. They also feel like that was beneficial in some aspects, engaging with people remotely. And also for people that we realized that they travel a long way to come to Newtown, just to ask for very simple things. Now they've realized that they can do that, and without having to come all the way to Newtown.
Yeah, fantastic. So you can see actually a positive impact there on your mission ultimately.
Yes,
with the adaptations that you've made.
And people are becoming a bit more independent, not just relying so much on coming to Newtown. Yeah.
Fantastic. How about you, Kylie? Did you change your have you adapted your actual programs, and how did that affect your missions?
Well, we were quite lucky in the fact that probably about 18 months ago, we went paperless because we were living in a place where even events, there was just all these papers where people had to sign in and everything now. It just got finished last year, where a volunteer signs up and does all their signs their confidentiality, signs their privacy agreement, signs their volunteer agreement right at the time of when they go onto our website. So we were totally paperless program, so that helped. The thing is that at this time of the year, I've usually got about 17 different events going at one time. Everything's shut down. So I had to cancel so many volunteers and there was no events going on. So what we thought we'll do is try virtual. So we actually started a virtual program, volunteering program, whereas I went to all the staff and I challenge any of you on this now. You could all do it. Go to your staff and say, what would you really like? I don't want you to give me work that, you know, one of your assistants can do, but what extra work could you have? Surely there's some research. And all of a sudden, one team started, and then, you know, the corporate team, they sent me some research for the volunteers to do. And then the Trust and Foundations team went, oh, wow. And then marketing came to me, and then brand, then campaigns. And so I've actually had to advertise through the Centre for Volunteering for virtual volunteers with some research experience that would give me at least 4 hours a week for 6 months. And I've set up this online portal where the jobs come and I put all the different jobs up. The volunteers can log in. They virtually log in using a QR code when they start their job and finish, so I can get statistics. And I looked at it the other day, and I've had one volunteer was logging in at midnight on a Saturday and did 2 hours till 2 a.m. But it's perfect. Like, we had something like 48 volunteers apply for this role in 72 hours. We had to pull it down. Now, some of the Centre for Volunteering people were like, it took us so long to set that up, and then you put it straight down. It was so well received. The staff are just, I just did a lunch and learn with our staff about our new portal because they were just blown away by it. And then, but in our core, we have events. So events will be coming back. So why don't we pre-plan for our events? Rather than our volunteers turning up to a big gala ball, I send them out emails with their briefs, and then I brief them on the day. Why don't we just do, the staff and I are going to do a bit of role playing. Then we're going to have some virtual meetings where we're going to invite some event staff to talk to the volunteers. So we're going to work out a program to train these volunteers in the events before the events even start. So once the events come back, I'm going to have a cohort of really trained, really eager volunteers that can get there on the ground running. So we're trying to think of ways, keeping our volunteers engaged, but we're also going to be having our volunteers with a lot more confidence. They're going to have all this more experience. They're going to be asking the questions now rather than at the event. So yeah, it's been a really good thing. I'm seeing it as a positive because it's made us pivot, but it's also made us, the biggest word, innovative. We've all been so innovative with the way we're doing things, rather than doing things because that's the way we've always done them. Yeah. We're thinking of new ways. So when it comes to this time next year, it won't matter if we go into some sort of, like, I'm knocking on wood, people, promise. if a lockdown ever comes, we're going to just go we're already ready for it. We're looking at virtual and in-person options, everything. So yeah, I'm in a an event space where you think that there's no events, so we should have no volunteering. But I'm at the moment training 20 new virtual volunteers, and I've already got 20. I've got about 15 of them already. So we're going to have about 35 volunteers that are working 24/7 at their own time. Like, people want to come and help, want to come and support the children in hospital, but they're working full time or they're at university. I'm saying to them, you're giving me a commitment of 4 hours a week, but I'm not going to be checking up. You can just, you're going to have weeks when you've got exams or when you've got a sick child. You don't have to volunteer then, but you could pick it up on a Sunday afternoon, sitting outside in the sun, grab your laptop out and do a bit of research. You've got a choice of all these different virtual volunteering roles to do. Yeah, so I think it's been a positive thing.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we've seen, for example, in the State of Volunteering report that volunteers they want that flexibility. The way the workforce is changing is that's what people are looking for. So to finding a way of facilitating that it's incredible. Kylie, how about yourself, Diana? Did you make any?
Yeah, very much so. I'd like to just pick up on what Kylie was saying about the staff becoming quite creative. We had a wonderful sort of response from staff once they got the idea, and I think one of the things that helped was that to start with, when we first had people still coming in on site, we needed to do temperature checking and that sort of thing in the front foyer of our main, of all our sites, but I was at Allambie, and so we tried to engage as many of our existing volunteers as we could, and redeploy them when their normal role wasn't there. We put them into this temperature checking role, which meant that they were in front of house and very visible to the whole organisation. And so a volunteer was the first person that everybody met when they came in the door. And it was really lovely because it sort of really put volunteers at the front of mind of all of our staff. And so we got so many staff sort of thinking, a volunteer could help me with that. So whereas, we've been sort of, I feel like saying we've been telling you that for ages. So it was really nice that we had that response. But our staff have also been really creative with the way our volunteers can help our clients directly as well. So we've had the main thing that's happened for us during this recent lockdown was that all our accommodation houses, of course, were completely locked down and our day programs were non-existent. So our clients were locked down in the accommodation houses and couldn't go to their usual day programs. And so we brought the day programs into the houses, so via Zoom. So, for example, lovely Penny Howell, who won an award at the Upper North Shore Volunteer Awards just recently, had been doing live concerts with her keyboard and singing in our two of our day programs. And so we created her role to be online, and she set that up in her own home with the Zoom, and it meant that she reached an audience of 40 people at each concert twice a week, because she was able to we were able to Zoom it out to all the different houses where everybody was. So it was just fantastic. And we have a wonderful staff member who sort of hosts those, and she's fantastic and, gives each day a theme, and Penny dresses up, and, it's just wonderful. So and a lot of the staff, in my team sort of tune in, and we have it on in the background because it's such a feel good thing to do just during lockdown, to have that sort of happening in the background, and we all chime in and, put our 2 bobs worth in. So it was a really, really wonderful. And we've got lots of examples of that. We've got virtual trivia sessions for the clients, where we've got a volunteer who's doing preparing the trivia slides and questions, so that the staff member doesn't have to do that. We've got a virtual dance program with a volunteer. We've got a virtual bingo session where a volunteer is calling the numbers. So lots of different lovely roles, which I think the volunteers have really taken to, because they've been fun roles, to be honest. So it's been really lovely to see that sort of develop, and I think it'll continue, I think really. And we've had other sort of creative things happening, like in the first lockdown in particular, when I think everyone was caught off guard, and the clients were in lockdown, we had volunteers delivering care packages and arts and crafts to the houses to give the clients something to do, because they couldn't really go out, and the staff couldn't go out shopping for these items. So we had them all donated, and we had volunteers contactlessly delivering things around. And we had some volunteers who did a drive-by for one of the clients' 70th birthdays with, happy birthday balloons. They decorated their cars and drove past the house and tooted their horns. So, look, lots of fun things. And I agree a bit with Kylie. There's been so many positive things to come out of this, and it sort of has, I guess, allowed us to put a different spin on how our volunteers interact with our clients to a certain extent. So it's, there's been lots of good things that have come out of it.
I'm very curious to learn more about volunteer bingo. I was like, oh, that sounds fun.
Well, no, it's just the volunteer calls out all the numbers. Lots of fun.
Yeah, fantastic. So the next kind of questions then, where I'm happy to answer any questions that have come through from the chat. I haven't seen any. I'm not sure if I've got the same chat as everyone else, but if you've got any questions for the panel, please post them now, and we can address either a specific panel member or just generally for the panel. But the next question is, I want to pose to you, it's kind of a two-ended question. And one is looking at your plans for re-engagement in the future. So bringing back your volunteers in a face-to-face, and it sounds like for a lot of people, there's going to be an online, ongoing blended model, and you're going to take the best bits out of COVID. But I know a lot of volunteers are chomping at the bit to get back face-to-face. So your plans for re-engagement and other future planning should we go into lockdown again. It sounds like Kylie's all set up already if we have to go into lockdown again. But what about plans for re-engagement? And possibly if we start with you, Leanne.
I guess for us, we have, because it's not it's a whole year type thing, we do ask our volunteers when they join us whether or not they're able to help with either our March and August dignity drive or our It's in the Bag. Our It's in the Bag campaign, we generally have around 500 volunteers across the state assist with that. We have since March last year, when halfway through our March dignity drive, we had to shut it down mid-month. Every campaign, we've been affected by some sort of lockdown. So we plan for a COVID-free campaign, and we just have to obviously adapt as because like during August, the landscape changed daily as to, whether or not a different region was going to go into lockdown or whatever. So for us, it's about the re-engagement is just making those connections again and ensuring that they that we've reached out to them, whether or not it be through workplace or through an email, and let them know that we're back on board. Because for some of our volunteers, it was just too much for them to actually be checking into workplace to see what was the latest news, what was happening. For some of our volunteers, it was easier for them to actually just switch off because they just didn't have the capacity to kind of take that extra load on. So it's all about, making sure that they're aware that, for us, that our It's in the Bag campaign is coming up, and that they're available to help us with that, because we can't do what we do. Our campaigns do not come to fruition without actual people on the ground doing those physical pickups. So for us, it's making sure that they are aware that we're back on board, that we need them to actually, we're passing out the message all the time that we can't do what we do without you. So that's a really important message to get out there. And we've just, fortunately for us, we have a really large social media following, so we're able to publish that message out on our social media that, particularly in New South Wales, we didn't actually need any new, we didn't have any areas that were lacking in volunteers for this next campaign, but for some states, they were desperate for new volunteers in areas. And so those posts go up on our social media, encouraging people to register by our website. So yeah, I guess for us, it's just about, making those connections again and encouraging our volunteer base to actually switch back on in time for our upcoming campaigns. So yeah, that's the plan is actually getting that message out there without bombarding them, I suppose, and with consideration that for some of our volunteers, they just don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to actually assist for this campaign that's coming up in November, and that's okay. We understand that, and we just, we send them a message and say, well, we really hope that we see you again next year in time for our March drive. So, and that's all you can do. You can't force someone to volunteer or to give more than what they're able to give. It's about understanding and taking that on board and allowing them the space to go and refresh and recover and re-energize and come back next year, perhaps the next campaign, with a completely different mindset. So I guess, yeah, it's about that. It is. It's verbal and social media encouragement to jump back on and because we simply can't do what we do without our volunteers on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of, start the awareness campaign to start with, but then also allowing a kind of a choice re-engagement when people are ready. I think you'll have a lot more effective launch, as it were. How about yourselves, Dana? Do you have firm plans for a re-engagement that's set?
I think our challenge will be that it will all be quite gradual. Our clients, of course, are very, their health is quite compromised in many cases, so we have to be very, very cautious. I think the organisation's taking a very cautious approach to opening up, and some programs will open up, sooner than others. So our re-engagement is going to be quite gradual and quite program specific. So we'll have to sort of communicate with different groups of volunteers differently. So, and in some cases that'll even come down to the 4 square metre rule, because in some parts of our building, there won't be enough room for the volunteers as well as the clients and the care workers and the therapists and program managers. So, but having said that, I guess it'll be on a case by case basis a lot of the time. But I think that, again, the main thing is to keep volunteers informed. I'm really conscious that some of them will be saying, wondering when their program is going to start back. So I think that's really, really the important issue for us, is to make sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. We've already had a few, volunteers sort of emailing in and saying, so am I supposed to come back next week? And it's really to get around to everybody, and still and in some cases we don't know yet, the answer. So that's going to be our challenge, but it will be fairly gradual. I think we also closed down over Christmas for 3 weeks for the main part. So I think we probably won't ramp up very much with our volunteers. It'll just be fairly gradual before Christmas, before shutdown, and then we'll see how the situation is in January and reassess and get into full swing then if things are still looking promising. So so it's a tricky one at the moment, I think, for our organisation and for our volunteers, because each case is a bit different.
Yeah, especially when you've got such a broad range of different programs that you're working with, and each one needs an individual approach. How about yourself, Oscar? So do you have any firm plans for re-engagement, like a set rollout of re-engagement?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been working with 2 other volunteers is to create a way to offer training to staff members who engage with volunteers, because many of them haven't been able to engage with volunteers during the lockdown. So what we created are resources so that staff are trained on how to deal with different issues like risk management, recruitment, interviewing, so they can do that online. So that's been great in terms of like how staff are now facing or like engaging with volunteers again. And just during this week, with the restrictions being lifted, we have advertised for 6 positions, and 4 of them are new. So just as an idea of like how we've identified the gaps that were existing, and now that volunteers are willing to engage back with us, they have 4 new positions that they can apply for. And the only thing that we have realized is that before we were always asking for face-to-face. Now all of these roles can be done remotely, but we are asking if volunteers, or we actually ask that volunteers have the willingness to do that face-to-face. So even when the role can be done remotely, we're asking them like, look, at some point, this is gonna be needed to be done face-to-face. Are you willing to do that? So that's the option that we've given. And then we've offered these new roles to existing volunteers first to see if they wanted to re-engage with us. And then later we've got a pool of people who have shown interest in volunteering with us. And then we've sent out that email out to all of them as well.
Mm.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and great to see that how you've again that communication and making sure that people are aware. But wonderful to see you've got new roles that are coming up and so soon as well.
Yeah,
and you've got the plan to have remote going to face as well. I think having that flexibility is essential. Yeah. How about you, Kylie? What do you have plans for re-engaging face to face, or kind of plans already for any future lockdown? Do you have a button?
I wish. No, we have. Look, I've been inundated with requests for a lot of different events. Some events are coming back right now. Some events are coming back next year. I'm letting the experts talk about it in the background about how we're going to come back, getting our plans and all that sort of stuff. We haven't actually got a direct plan for what day. I don't think anyone has when everything's going to be lifted. So I don't want to have that conversation with volunteers yet till I'm 100% over it, because we want to keep our volunteers engaged, but we don't want to put any extra pressure, because we have had such personal conversations with our volunteers. A lot of them have been really stressed and worried during lockdown. So what I'm doing is just making it positive, and we're talking about what we can engage our volunteers with now. So we're not really doing any re-engagement, because we're constantly engaged with our volunteers. It's just about talking about what opportunities we have now for our volunteers. So I'm not too sure about a date of when events will be coming back, but we're going to talk about when we do go back to events. So that's why we're doing these Zoom meetings with training about what we're going to be doing in the future. And also a lot of our virtual volunteers, we're just advertising that sort of stuff and having the conversations. Like Leanne said, you don't want to put any more extra pressure, because we're getting to know our volunteers and they're just like our family and friends, and people are worried. We just want to support our volunteers, not add to it.
Yeah, fantastic. I think everyone's aware that there's been quite enough pressure as we're going. So I see there's a question come in from Tamsin in the chat, and she said, what are your concerns regarding having volunteers coming back, and what are the kind of challenges that you see with that?
The face-to-face volunteering.
Yeah.
Well, it's just being out in the environment, isn't it? So there's two things for us. We've got the events, so being in big crowds. So we're not too sure about that. So that is a concern. That's why I don't want to have that conversation, even remotely alluding to that sort of conversation, till I'm totally comfortable with all the answers that could be coming to me, because sometimes I am the only support of these volunteers. So I want to be able to know confidently what I can say to them. So there's that. And there's also, the concern of where my offices are, which is inside a children's hospital. So, and we're talking about we're in a health environment, with the pandemic. So they're my major concerns. Until I have those answers and I'm comfortable enough to support the volunteers, I don't want to just go out there and say, hey, we're going back to events tomorrow, and bang, hit me with your questions, and I don't have the answers. So it's just all about planning for us.
I think one of the other problems that we need to be aware of, we do, certainly in January, we will have, for example, some therapy and intensive programs, which we hope will still run, but they're very, very dependent on one-on-one support for the children. So we must have the right number of volunteers. So, and I'm very conscious that with COVID, people are going to drop out. There's going to be a dropout, and it could happen the night before. Somebody could, be a casual contact at Woolies and then have to ring up the night before and say, I'm sorry, I can't come in. Or they might wake up with feeling unwell and have to go and have a COVID test. So we're feeling that we need to over-recruit for a program like that, where it's so vital that we have the right number of volunteers, because we need to be prepared that we're going to inevitably lose a few people, and it could be without any notice whatsoever. It could be on the morning. So that's one of the things that we've sort of identified as quite a potential, issue which we'll need to plan for.
And it sounds like you've got a solution there as well, which is fantastic.
As long as we can find enough volunteers.
Yeah.
Because they're fairly specific, these ones. They have to be therapy students, and so it's quite challenging, but we'll get there.
Yeah, planning for the unexpected.
Yeah, I think that's what we've all learned through this period, is that we can't plan because we don't know what's around the corner, and everything can fall apart at the last minute. So yep,
plan for the unexpected. That's exactly right. And for us with our volunteers, we've actually had to be really specific and say to them, when you go out to do a collection, make sure you've got rubber gloves, make sure you've got your hand sanitizer, make sure you've got a mask. And so that message for us would be a new message, because prior to COVID, we used to say, make sure you've got a receptacle big enough to collect the donations. And then suddenly we've had to turn around and go, like, don't forget your gloves, make sure you've got your hand sanitizer, make sure you've got a mask, keep that, that 1.5 meters away from the people around you. And so the even though we've been working with those parameters for the last 18 months, 2 years, it's still an unusual thing to think about, that when you go out, that you've got to have these health preparations with you, because ordinarily you wouldn't have, and I guess that's for anything that we do, our interaction with others has changed out in the public, and that's possibly one of the biggest changes that we've had to adapt to, is that that our volunteers are prepared from a health and safety aspect, which we didn't really. We did obviously have those concerns, but not to this degree. So that has been a changing landscape for us, and something that we've had to work with, and like I said, from day to day, the situation can change from day to day. So you can plan that everything's going to go ahead, and then if something happens and it goes in, we go into lockdown, or a region goes into lockdown, or one of our regional areas, they just can't participate. It is what it is, and that became my catchphrase all during August. You can't stress about it. There's so many others that are probably doing it much worse. So it is what it is, and we'll cross that bridge when we can.
Yeah, superb. That kind of leads us into our next question, which is really about your risk mitigation strategies. And Leanne, you touched on this when you're talking about your kind of health preparation checklist. Do you have your gloves? Do you have your mask? But yeah, what risk mitigation strategies do you have moving forward? And I see there's a question pops in the chat as well. A couple of questions asking about. It's maybe sensitive at the moment, but thoughts on collecting evidence about COVID vaccinations. And I'll open that out to the panel if anyone's ready to jump in with their thoughts on evidence of collecting COVID vaccinations. But of course, this is one of your risk mitigation strategies when we're talking about re-engaging face-to-face or getting volunteers directly out with our clients. So how do you feel?
We won't be asking that question. That's something that as a charity we've decided we won't be asking our volunteers whether or not they're vaccinated. They will, all we can do is ask them to follow, your local health guidelines, follow COVID safe protocols. And we may find that at Christmas time during November with our It's in a Bag campaign, Bunnings is our centralised collection point across the country. Now, we may find that Bunnings will not allow our volunteers in unless they're vaccinated. And unfortunately, if a volunteer has signed up to do a pickup at that store, we can't ask Bunnings to change their processes. So that volunteer will have to work with another volunteer, perhaps, who is vaccinated. But as a charity, that's something that we won't be delving into. We won't be asking their vaccination status.
Yeah, of course, unless you fall within a public health order, in which case you don't have a choice.
Yeah,
that's right.
For anyone that you're working with. What about? Sorry, Oscar. What was it that you were going to say?
Yeah, no. Couple of weeks ago, we sent a survey to volunteers just to ask how they were feeling about vaccinations, because we're working right now as we speak and creating a policy both for staff and volunteers, and then on the other side, the people we support, just to make sure that there are many different scenarios that can happen. As of now, we are asking everyone that comes into the center to show a vaccination certificate. So we've been having volunteers coming into the center already to volunteer with us, but they all came with their vaccination certificate. But we are working with vulnerable people, and some of the people we support haven't been able to get vaccinated. So we're working on ways on like creating pathways so that, for example, if someone that comes to the center to ask for support and doesn't have a vaccination certificate, we're not just going to let them live on the street without getting supported. We're going to find ways in creating a safe environment for everyone while being able to support people in a nice way. So probably we'll come up with something next week. We'll have more clarity on that. But as of now, yes, we're asking for vaccination certificate for everyone.
And what was the feedback from just?
Oh yeah, so the survey was actually overwhelming, the number of people that replied to that. So it was sent out to 400 volunteers, and I think 120 of them replied. And some of the answers they gave were quite lengthy. So it took quite a while to go through all the answers, because obviously we have to keep everyone in mind. We also deal with volunteers who are retired and have had health issues in the past, so they were showing their concerns as well. But I think most of them were actually, saying that we have to ask everyone for a vaccination certificate if they want to come to the center. So that was the overall idea that I got from the answers that they gave us.
Yeah, awesome, and great that you're representing their views in your policies as well. Sorry, Diana, I think I just chopped you off there quickly.
No, I was just going to say that we've, I guess, being in the disability sector, it's been a fairly straightforward decision for us, I suppose. And actually, Cerebral Palsy Alliance as an organisation has made full vaccination mandatory for all staff and all volunteers. So as of from the 30th of November. So obviously we've sent that communication out to all our relevant volunteers. There's a handful of roles where that won't apply to for some people who have absolutely no occasion to come into one of our sites, but for anybody else it will be mandatory. We've had a really positive response from our volunteers, I must say. Nobody has expressed, any negative feedback. We've had lots and lots of really positive feedback, and to date, I think we've got about probably getting up to 40% of the people that we sent out the communication to. We've had their vaccination certificates back. And some, of course, there'll be another group which are halfway through. We'll have only had one jab, so we expect that will increase. And yeah, it's very cut and dried from our point of view, I'm afraid. So yeah, there's no leeway in our organisation for that. So it's been really lovely to get the positive feedback from the volunteers, but it's also been quite a good indication of commitment from a lot of volunteers too. You can see the people who've sent it back straight away, and you sort of think, and there's no surprises there, I guess, is the other thing. It's the people you would expect. So that's our standpoint on it as an organisation, being in the disability and the health sector. So,
and I think a lot of people who are applying for the roles that we are advertising they actually come up without us asking for the certificate. The first thing they say, I've got a certificate, I'm fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
Like people are really willing to show that they've been vaccinated so that they can engage with us.
Yeah.
And Elaine has just asked as well, are you asking the people who the volunteers are visiting to show evidence of being fully vaccinated as well? So are you getting that from your clients as well?
Our clients, yes.
Volunteers?
So good question. For our clients, I mean, obviously we can't make it mandatory, but for in-person and in on-site services, it will only be for vaccinated clients. We will work out another path for other volunteers. We have telepractice up and running, which has been being used all through COVID as well. So a lot of our therapists are running their therapy programs through telepractice at the moment, which has been a great success, and a lot of clients find it more convenient because it's transport is quite difficult. So there are certainly ways that we'll work around clients who for whatever reason maybe can't be vaccinated or being able to be at this point. So obviously we won't be wanting to turn clients away.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I guess that's the difference for us too, is that here in New South Wales, all of our volunteers and for myself, we all operate from home. So our interaction with each other is like this, it's virtual. And we have obviously had to follow COVID regulations. So for our volunteers that have been able to do their pickups, if they've had to deliver to a charity, particularly during lockdown, many of them have done it in a COVID safe way. So they would phone the charity and then and say, I'm just going to drop this on the front veranda, or I'm going to drop this at the door. So there was no actual physical contact. And we may find that they will have to do something similar if they're unvaccinated and they go to an organisation where they have to show their vaccination certificate and check in. Our volunteers are going to have to adapt and do it in a way that meets our charity partners the way they operate. So yeah, we're a little bit different in that we all operate from home. The majority of what we do day to day is virtual, and we're being fortunate that Woolworths as a collection point, and again Bunnings, is basically being designated as essential shopping, and so our volunteers can go in without having that vaccination certificate, and then the deliveries we can always do a COVID safe drop off to our charity partners. So for us, we would either way can still operate and support those that we support, because we don't have those I won't say limitations, but we're not working under the same parameters that, say, Diana is working in with, clients that are at risk. So for us, it's a little bit different, and in that way, we are able to probably, I won't say get away with, but we are comfortable in not requiring our volunteers to be vaccinated, because there's a way, there's a sidestep in how we can operate without that.
Yeah.
I have the difference to both Diane and Leanne.
Yes, I'm interested in what your position is, Kylie.
I have volunteers that are going to go out into a community, into an event.
Yes.
I myself, as a volunteer manager, have put it back to our broader team to try and work out a process, because I see the questions that are coming back. They're the questions that I'm asking. Like, okay, if I collect that information as it is, a lot of staff can access because it's on our database, the volunteers, but this is a health thing. So surely we'll have to find out a way of making this so, finding out someone's vaccination status shouldn't be, anyone can have a look at that. So that's one question. But then what happens if, for instance, if we are all vaccinated, will the volunteers going into a place that there's people that aren't vaccinated? Like,
of course.
a lot of, so rather than trying to, like, they're working on that, trying to find ways that we can do things to support everyone, that we're all comfortable and know the answers. I think it's going to take a couple of weeks, couple of months till we know what the situation is, and trying to find ways to do things support these sick kids in hospital, but do it in a virtual way. That's what we've done. I can't answer all those questions. They're great questions, but when you're going to have your volunteers going into the great unknown, I'm not willing to do that at the moment. So
yeah, it's really interesting. I think, I guess, hearing that, I feel quite fortunate, I guess, that decision and that situation was taken out of my hands. I don't have a choice. So, that's what it is. So,
yeah.
And have there been any other risk mitigation strategies? So, there's the public health orders, there's the rules around 4 per square meter, and those kind of things that you have to apply in your public spaces. But have you thought of any other ways, or are you utilising already any other ways for mitigating the COVID risks going forward for your volunteers or for your clients as well?
I guess, I mean, it's nothing really positive, I'm afraid, but we've cancelled all our client Christmas parties and things that we normally have at the end of the year. We normally have corporate support, and we have lovely family parties at each therapy site. Well, none of that will be happening this year. Instead, there'll be sort of a small gift or something, or a hamper sent out to families, which is what we had to do last year too. So I guess it's in a way, it's mitigating the risk, because we just have made a blanket decision that we can't take the risk to hold an event like that. Whereas it might be okay on the day, but you can't plan an event like that and then have it cancelled at the last minute. It's too much work and too stressful for everybody, so including the families. So it's better to assume that it can't go ahead at this stage, and make other ways of connecting with our families and wishing them a happy Christmas. Yeah.
Same here. We used to offer lunch at the center 5 days a week. Then last year we started doing 2 days a week, but now I don't think it's going to happen up until the end of the year. And same for events like Human Rights Day in December and the end of the year event that we usually host for volunteers. I don't think that will be happening this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, so more important than ever to engage our volunteers remotely if we're missing out. I mean, the good thing is that people are finally allowed out after a first time. So I think people will be getting a bit of a fix of having a bit of face-to-face interaction, just for things like going to the shops, going out for dinner. But yeah, really important.
An idea for some people who do have a volunteer party at the end of the year. We don't usually have a volunteer party at the end of the year. We have it in May for Volunteer Week. So those that have a volunteer Christmas party, just tell them that you're just putting it back till May, till Volunteer Week, and then everyone wins. We did our volunteer party the year before, our thank you function, virtually, and it worked. But it'll give you a couple of months. That's what we were lucky. We don't have to do a Christmas party because we make our big one in May. So maybe if some of you are doing that, that's a way of putting it off, but not.
Yeah.
It's exactly what our National Volunteer Week's been missing, is a Secret Santa.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for those suggestions. We're kind of almost at the end of the session. We've got 10 minutes left, so if you've got any questions, and I see Maggie's asked a question about dealing with volunteers that are not vaccinated. I think, Diana, you covered that with your telehealth and talking to Leanne about how your engagement is remote and not, or in a venue where they're managing the access points. So I think that's been addressed, but if anyone else has got any other questions, now is the time to post in the chat. We've got this fantastic panel with us who have been amazing in sharing their knowledge and the learning over this really challenging time, where we've seen this innovation and this adaptation to keep these programs going and to keep those hundreds, was it thousands now, Kylie, of volunteers engaged in the program, and actually, growing programs as well over this time, which is incredible to see, because you'll know as well as we do that the needs have not gone away. They're just as before, and even more so. So if you've got any questions, I ask you to post it into the chat now. And I'll just give
even ideas that we haven't thought of so far.
Yeah.
Yes, that is brilliant. Please brain splurge of all the amazing individuals we've got here today. If you've got any super ideas to share, Please post those in the chat too. Fantastic idea. Thank you, Diana.
I'm sure we haven't thought of everything. So the Spotify idea, Kylie, I think I might.
I wrote that one down. And also I loved your idea of putting that, putting it out to the volunteers, like to your staff, to engage your volunteers, is what tasks would you be happy to give up, or would you need help with? And I've noted that one down too, because that's
just be careful. I've always, well, you've got to really be careful. The main volunteer manager thing is a volunteer can't replace a paid staff member. I always tell that to the staff before you put that out, because you'll always have someone saying, "Oh, can they come and do all my filing?" Well, no, they're not. That's part of your role. No, be innovative and think of something outside your role. And if you put that research, because everyone in every role could have someone researching something about their role, like they don't have the time to do that. Research is always a good way to start, and then their minds just go, crazy and get really innovative.
We have I have a leadership team that supports me, and we're all volunteers. And one of the things that we obviously try to work with is, or what we try to do is reduce the workload on the leadership team, because most of us work full time, and we do our Share the Dignity role in our spare time. And so for us, it may be, we have 600 plus charities that on our database, and prior to any campaign we do an email out. But you would know that the charity environment, it's very fluid, so people come and go, and so often our database is not up to date. And so instead of our leadership team making those 300 phone calls, then we start delegating that out to the volunteers, because it means that they're actually they've got something to do that makes them feel like they're actually contributing to what we do as a leadership team. So we do try to do that as well. But sometimes you need the right people to be putting their hand up to do those tasks for you. So that can be a challenge as well.
Interview, put their job out. You'll be surprised. No, actually, you'll be shocked. If you put a job out like I did for the virtual volunteers who do administration support, I can tell you I have the head IT guy for a big government department has asked to volunteer with me. I have a senior solicitor. I have a HR professional. I have the most amazing professionals and a couple of retiree professionals, because what happens to CEOs? They don't just all go to a CEO retirement home. There is amazing people that just want to do amazing things. So if you put out a job ad that's just saying to them that they'll be adding to these other professionals, you'll be surprised at the people that you'll get. And also you've got young volunteers, get them. We're going to be looking at a program where we're going to actually train our young volunteers in being social media experts. So rather, when our brand and marketing team put something up on social media, I could just send it to this group of volunteers, and then they'll put it out into their networks. Think about that sort of stuff, having your volunteers as your ambassadors, even making a program called Your Ambassadors. You just got to think outside the square, and you'll be surprised. Everyone could start up a virtual volunteering to support your staff, but you've got to get the staff to think innovative, not they'll do my filing.
And also ask your volunteers as well. It's not volunteers sometimes have really good ideas, and some of the volunteers that have been supporting the center have been actually here for longer than most of the staff members. We've got volunteers who've been with us for 10 years, and they are able to know what works and what doesn't better than even a paid member here at the center. And we've had a couple of volunteer-led initiatives and roles That's because volunteers have identified what the needs are, because they've had engagements with the people we support for a long time. And yeah, actually, we need to give them that opportunity to lead, and they're going to be joining. They've been joining the interviewing panel with some staff members, so they feel like they've got the capacity, and now we've given them the power to do that. So that it's also important to take that into account.
And those volunteers, you've got to find out their currency, because I always say that all volunteers have a currency. It doesn't matter, you know, all volunteers are paid. That meme that goes around that volunteers aren't paid is incorrect. Every volunteer has a currency. Their currency may be just social support. Their currency could be they're joining your organisation. A lot of volunteers that join my foundation is because they've had children who are sick in the hospital and they want to give back, or they've been a sick child. But a lot have been because they want to work in a hospital. So when I find out, especially from these virtual volunteers that I work a lot with, if I find out that someone is studying medicine, I will make sure that I can get them to work with a doctor or a nurse or something in the profession that they like and help them out and pay them. You give them their currency. Yeah. And you'll be surprised. You'll probably find a lot of people that you haven't even thought about. If you put this ad out, all of a sudden, Leanne, you're going to get people who could be supporting your board or could be adding so much to your executive team, especially if they're all volunteers themselves, if you get those professionals.
Yeah, that's something that I really picked up on, and it's so true. Sometimes you just need you know, that's what's been so good about today is that even though we all come from different volunteering backgrounds, and the work that we do is different across the board, there's an opportunity to learn. So it's today's been really valuable, and so I've got a page here where I've been jotting stuff down. So I think there's always an opportunity for us to learn from each other, and today's been great. And you know, thinking outside the square. And I've never really thought about, you know, a volunteer has that, you know, pay them in the currency that they're looking for. So I think that's a really great point that you've managed to share with us all today. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time. We're going to wrap up in just the last minute. Thank you so much to our panel today for your feedback, for your input, for your participation. It's been absolutely fantastic. Patrick, I think we don't have collections from donations directly with the panel here today, but if anyone else wants to jump in or send me a message, we can follow that up for you. We do have a couple of other things coming up. If you want to talk about volunteer motivations and tapping into that volunteer pay packet, we do have recruit and retain workshops coming up on the 26th of October and the 9th of November. And this is the first of a series of workshops in this re-engagement of volunteers. So we've got another 2 seminars coming up where we'll Clint, who's the manager of our Commonwealth programs, will be going through some of the resources available and looking at redesigning your volunteer programs. So taking that going forward, and a sneak peek into the volunteer managers toolkit. Yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your participation, for your fantastic ideas today. It's really been wonderful, and I would like to say thank you, and I'm sure the attendees here today will join me in saying thank you so much for your time today.